Hello. Okay, so this week what we're going to cover off is week 3 of Excel. It's called Excel Manage Multiple Worksheets. So again, what I would ask you to do is go to Fanshawe Online, go to the Manage Multiple Worksheets topic in content, and download the start file called EXL03_parking. I want you to pause the lecture until you have that open, and then we'll get started. Okay, so I'm assuming you have the file open now, or you're not going to, and you're going to follow along as we go through the 10 skills today. So as you can see on the topics here, I've got them broken down so that again you can follow the lecture along with the textbook and make sure that we're keeping in pace. So skill number 1 is organize worksheet tabs. You can see what we're going to be covering off there. Skill number 2 and so on up through skill number 10, which is basically a review on charts. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to look at is working between worksheet tabs. So as you can see in this worksheet, we have 4 tabs. There's one called Topics, one called Sheet number 1, Sheet number 2, and Sheet number 3. Within Excel, you can have an unlimited number of worksheets within a workbook. The whole purpose of worksheets is so that you can put information together into like folders. So in this particular case, we're looking at parking revenue for the municipality. If you were to look at sheet 1 and you would look at the top, it says this is for April, sheet 2 is for May, and sheet 3 is for June. So they have one worksheet called parking, and in that worksheet they'll eventually have 12 worksheets, one for each month. So that's the whole purpose of worksheet tabs. All right, so let's go back to sheet number 1. The problem with worksheet tabs are by default they're going to call them sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3, sheet 4, and so on. We would rather have a name that's more indicative of what we're capturing here. So we're going to change the names on these worksheet tabs to match the contents that we want. So sheet number 1 is actually April, so you can see up here in cell A1, this is the April information. So there's a number of ways you can change a worksheet tab. You can right click on the sheet tab and click on rename. So we'll call this one April. You can simply double click in a worksheet tab to give yourself edit in place. You can see that the name sheet 2 is highlighted, so I'm going to type May. And for sheet 3 you can change it any way you want and call that one June. Okay, so another visual indicator when you're working within Excel is you can see that the June worksheet tab is highlighted and it's all in white, whereas the April, May, and the topics worksheets are not. So they're not active at this point in time. So any changes you make are being made in the June worksheet. Another way we can make them more indicative of what we're trying to do is we can change the color of the worksheet tabs. So let's click on the April worksheet. There's a couple of ways again to change color on a worksheet tab. You can click on the worksheet, go up to the Format option on the Home tab, and there's an option here called Tab Color. So we're going to pick a color here. A second way to do it is you can right click on the sheet tab and click on Tab Color. So we'll change the color on this one, and again change the color on the June worksheet tab to whatever color that you want it to be. Now, the other way that you can tell which is the active worksheet tab, now that we've named changed the color on the tabs, is you can see that the color is blended out on the active worksheet. So when I go to the May worksheet tab, you can see that the purple color that was there is kind of washed out a bit. Click on the April one, the same thing. That'll become more important to us later on as we're working through grouping worksheets together, so that you know, because it's very important that you understand what tab you have active, because you don't want to be putting the June numbers but actually putting them into the April worksheet, because that's going to cause you problems down the road. Okay, now the other thing we want to talk about here are themes. So if I click on the Page Layout tab, you can see on the far left hand side you've got something called Themes. So these are all the different themes. You've got theme colors, so all the different color sets that you can pick. You have fonts, and you have effects. Now, I don't very seldom ever use effects. So let's take a look at themes. So when you go into Excel for the very first time, by default is the Office theme. So what a theme is a combination of colors, fonts, and special effects. So every theme is unique. They have different color sets, different font sets, and different special effects. And all of the themes are common across Excel, Word, PowerPoint, and so on. So the whole point here is that the themes are created by experts who understand color wheels and Pantone and all that other stuff to make sure that the colors are complementary and so on to each other. And and the nice thing too is that once you use a theme color, if you change the theme, that color will change within your spreadsheet. And if you're going to be taking Word documents and moving them into Excel, or you're taking a spreadsheet, moving it into PowerPoint, having a common theme makes your final work look much more professional. Okay, so let's just take a look here. We're going to change the theme here to, what do they want us to change it to? It doesn't really tell me here. So slipstream. Okay, so I'm going to go down here. I'm going to find slipstream. Maybe I'm not. Oh, I think that's the theme colors they want us to change. Yeah, okay. All right, so I'm just simply going to leave it with the Office theme for now. And then I'm going to go into colors, and I'm going to change the colors here to slipstream, so you can see it down here. But before I do that, let's take a look at the color schemes. So as you can see on the colors, the first two colors are always the same. It's black and white. But then you have 8 other sets of colors. So if you look on slipstream, you've got kind of a blue, turquoise, green, and so on. The point here is that if I click off of that for a second, if I take a look on the April worksheet here, you can see that the colors for the April cell A1 and A2 were kind of an orangey color. If I go on the Home tab, and if I click on font colors or background colors, these are background colors. Hold on, I gotta stop the dog from barking. Okay, hope you didn't get that. All right, so background colors, of course, are the colors in behind the cell. If I click on the colors, you can see that this color here is currently highlighted, so it's the third color in, third one down. So there's a red box around it. The important piece here is that these are my theme colors across the top, so white, black, orange, and so on and so forth. Theme colors are dependent on placement. So in this particular case, they've chosen the third color in, third color down. Now, again, looking at the colors across the top are the primary colors. And these are, and you can see at the very top in the heading it says theme colors. And then all the colors below are different variations on that top color. Okay, so if I was to click here and click highlight over top, you can see this is orange background 2, lighter 80%, lighter 60%, lighter 40%, darker 25%, and darker 50%. So all of these colors are, so the theme colors across the top, and then the colors below are just simply different saturations of that particular color. Across the bottom, you have what are called your standard colors. The standard colors are going to stay the same no matter what theme you have. So as I change my theme colors, I'm going to go back to page layout, click on colors, and go down to slipstream. All right, now that color in April, which used to be orange, is now blue. Again, if I go back to the Home tab and I click on the background colors, you can see that the theme colors have changed. My third color in now is a blue, and my third color down is a certain color. Okay, so the important piece here is that you should use your theme colors when creating a theme. Try to stay away from standard colors, because if you use a standard color and then you change the theme, that color will not change. It will stay the standard color. I'm also going to take a look here at fonts. So if you take a look at the font, so if I look at here at the word April, it's set up as an Arial 11 points. If I click the drop down, you can see at the very top that there are what called themed fonts. So the top is Arial for headings, and then Arial again for body. So fonts, so again, I'll go back to page layout and click on fonts. You can see if I go through the fonts, all of these different fonts The first one is the heading font, and the second one is the body font. So anything that has been determined by Excel as to being a heading, and again, if I was to go back to my Home tab and click in my styles, there's my headings. So these are all going to be whatever the heading font is, and my body fonts are going to be the other ones. So the ones that aren't set up as these ones here. Okay, so you can also change your fonts. Now understand you also have the option at the very bottom of that list to customize the fonts, to create your own heading and body fonts. Understand that that is not available on a Mac. Okay, all right, so that's basically theme, colors, and fonts. So this here is your fill color, and this is your font color. So the color of the text inside the cell. All right, so we've changed our font styles, and we changed the tab colors. Okay. All right, so that's basically skill number one. Okay. All right, so skill number two is talking about dates. So if I click on cell number A14 in the April worksheet, you can see that it's displaying as 131. But again, remember underlying value versus display value. So my underlying value is 131, but my actual value within the cell is January the 31st, 2014. Okay. If I go to my May worksheet, I don't have a date here, so I'm simply going to create a date. I'm going to use the Control semicolon, which is a keyboard shortcut, which simply takes today's date and puts it into a cell. Okay. And if I click on the June worksheet, you can see that the current date, again, I can do that, or I can put in the date function. So I can say equals today, bracket, bracket, and that finds today's date. Now the difference between that and the date that I put in here, this is a static date. So tomorrow when I bring up the worksheet, it'll still show as 12/26/2018. But if I go to the June worksheet, tomorrow that will actually show as 12/27/2018, and so on. Okay, I know it's kind of sad I'm doing this on Boxing Day, but that's the way it is. All right, so I'm going to go back to my April worksheet, and I want to talk to you a little bit more about dates, because it's important to us that we understand the way dates work within Excel. Dates are actually, so here, what I want you to do is go to a blank cell on the worksheet somewhere, and I want you to type in equals today, bracket, bracket. All right. Whoops, that's not going to work because it's not an equal sign. Equals today, bracket, bracket. Now, again, what I want you to understand here is that this is a function, no different than the sum function we used earlier, or the average or the min function. Every function always starts with the equal sign, and every function has a name that's assigned to that function, and every function will have brackets, and inside those brackets will be arguments. So on the sum function we had the columns above, on the average function we averaged a column of numbers, and min and max and so on. The today function, the now function, and the random function have no arguments. So the today function simply goes to your system clock and pulls off today's date. The now function pulls off today's date and time, and the random function simply creates a random number between 0 and 1. Okay, so just to understand the syntax, the rule for the function is that it will start with the equal sign, it'll have the name of the function, and it will have brackets. And most functions will have arguments inside the brackets that are separated by commas. But in this case, I want the today function, and then below that I want you to type in your birth date. So I'm going to type it in this format. I'm going to say AUG August space 31 comma space 1952. So that's the date of my birth, August the 31st, 1952. The reason I've typed it in that particular way is because that way it overrides some problems we have with dates in working with Windows on a Mac or on a PC. We'll come back to that in a second. All right. So when I hit enter, what it does is it'll take that date and it'll format with the default date format. We'll come back to that in a minute. But now what I want to do is I'm actually going to click on one of those dates, and I'm going to change the date format from a date format. So again, on the Home tab, you can see in the number group where it says date, I'm going to change that from date to general. Okay, so now what it shows is 43,460. Okay, so here's the important thing about dates. Dates are actually stored internally. Hold on. Sorry. Dates are stored internally as the number of days since January the 1st, 1900. Okay. The reason that the dates are stored internally that way is so that you can do math with dates. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to actually take today's date, we're going to subtract your birth date, we're going to tell you how old you are. Okay, so the today's is 43,460 days since January the 1st, 1900. If I change my birth date, it's 19,237 days since January the 1st, 1900. I'm going to highlight both of those. I'm going to change them back to a date format. And then I'm going to do some math. So I'm going to say equals today's date minus my birth date. And that's going to tell me that I am 24,223 days old. Okay, so just remember, dates are always stored internally as from January the 1st, 1900. Just as a point of interest, on a Mac, they're stored from January the 1st, 1904, and that's simply because the year 1900 was a leap year, and Microsoft didn't care, and a Mac did. So on a Mac, they started in 1904 to get away from that problem, and on a PC, it's 1900. Internally, it doesn't matter. Okay, so 24,223 days old. Now, nobody ever says, how old are you? And you tell them in days. You always tell them in years. So what I need to do is divide that by 365 for the number of days in a year. But then I'm also going to make it 0.25 because I want to account for leap years. Okay, because every fourth year is a leap year. So I've got I8, which is the today's date, minus my birth date, divided by 365.25, and I click enter. And it tells me I'm 43,407 years old. Well, of course that's wrong, and that's because of BEDMAS. Remember BEDMAS, brackets, exponents are done first, and then whenever it's evaluating an Excel a formula, and in Excel or any math situation, you always do brackets first, and then inside the brackets, or if there are no brackets, then you're going to do exponents. Then you're going to do multiplication or division. So it's one or the other, whichever one comes first when you're working from left to right through your formula, and then addition or subtraction. So in this particular case, if I evaluate that formula, what it's actually going to do is it's going to take I8 and it's going to subtract I9 divided by 365.25, which of course is wrong, because what I really wanted to do is to I8 minus I9 and then divide the result by 365.25. So what I need to do is tell Excel to do the subtraction first by putting in brackets. All right. So when I do that, it comes back and it tells me that I am 66.32 years old. Okay, normally I would format that to make that change and what have you. All right. So that's basically why dates are stored as a number. Okay. Now, I can change the date formats here, so I can highlight these date formats. I can click up here, so there's two date formats in the defaults, short date and long date. I don't want the long date. I don't want it to be 1226. I want to change that around. Okay, so I can always go down to the bottom here to more number formats. And then under dates, you can see that I have a whole raft of different date formats. So I can do it as, if I want it to show as March 14th, 2012, as opposed to 12/26, and sorry, that's just the format, that's not the actual date. That's going to say it's going to take your month and put it out as an alphanumeric, the day, a comma, and then the year. Notice down here I've got locale, English United States. All right, this is something that I specified right at the very beginning of the the course in the Getting Started section. It's very important when you're working with here that you understand that dates are displayed differently depending on your country that your computer is set up as. So in the English United States, it's month, day, year. So if I click over here on this date, today's date, you can see that it's 12/26/2018. If my computer was set up as English Canada, it would be month, day, year. So it would be day, month, year. It would be 26/12/2018. Now, that's not a problem when you're dealing with a date like the 26th of December. But if you're dealing with a date like the 9th of June, then if you're in Canada, that's going to show as let's see what I say, 9/6/2018. If you're in the United States, it's going to show as 6/9/2018. As the computers, as my IT lab is set up in the United States, you need your dates to be set up in a date format that is American. Now, to get around that, you can put your dates in simply as June space 9 slash or comma space 2018. And then it doesn't matter how your computer is set up internally, because that's going to show as June the 9th. If I had typed in 6/9, it would depend on the country that my computer is set up as. Another couple of things when you're entering years, if you enter a two-digit year, so 18 or 66 or what have you, Excel is going to interpret that as any date that's over 30. It's going to be treated as 1900. Any date that's under 30 is going to be treated as 2000. So if I type 18, it'll be 2018. But if I typed 68, it would be treated as 1968. Okay, so all right, so just remember that but you can get around that again by always typing in a 4-character year. The whole purpose of 2-character years was back before Y2K, trying to save the amount of space that was being taken up on your computer, and that was the whole purpose of the whole reason for Y2K, was because people used 2-digit dates and nobody for sure how programs are going to interpret those dates when they went to work on it. Okay, so 30 and higher is going to be treated as 2000 or as 1900, and under 30 is going to be treated as 2000. But again, type in a 4-character date, you won't have to worry about that. Okay. Oh, sorry. The other way you can actually get to the date formats. So I've shown you, if I click here, I can click on here on the drop down on the date defaults and go down to more number formats to bring up my dialog box for dates. I can also click on the launcher, which is this little box in the bottom right hand corner of a group of cells. That will also bring up the dialog box. And a third way to do it is I can right click on a cell and I can go down to format cells, and that will also bring up the dialog box. Okay, so it's how you want to it's completely up to you. Right click is the fastest way because you're not moving your mouse up to try and find things on the tabs, but it doesn't matter how you do it as you're working through. Okay, hold on. All right, so that's basically dates. One of the things that I don't particularly like about this example on the spreadsheet is that they have the words April on the April worksheet, May on the May worksheet, and June on the June worksheet. The problem with that is that it takes away some of my flexibility. If I want to be able to reuse sheets, I have to remember to go up and change this. Otherwise, I might have a sheet here that says July, August, and September, but still says April, May, and June up on the top. You can get around that if you click on Insert, and you go to Headers and Footers. One of the options you have in your headers and footers is something called a sheet name. So now what will happen if I click off of that, it's going to type June in the top. So rather than having typed June in the actual worksheet itself, I can simply use the headers and footers to take the name that displays on my footer or on my sheet tab and display that on the worksheet. Okay, so then it'll show June in the top of this one, and if I click on this one and go here, it'll show, well, I didn't put a header on this one, but if I added a header here, and I'll show you in a minute how to add headers to all the worksheets at the same time. Okay, so just a point, I'm not a real big fan of using static values in a cell that I can find someplace else, so that I don't have to worry about entering them twice. Okay. All right. So skill number 3 is talking about clear cell contents. The only important point here is remember I told you earlier that when you enter into a cell, um, there's 2 different things you enter into the cell. You enter the contents of the cell and the formats of the cell, and they're independent of each other. So you can see here on the April worksheet, the background color is that light blue. If I hit delete to get rid of the word April, the format color stays behind. Okay, so right now it's also bolded. So even though there's nothing showing, as soon as I start to type something, it will show up in bold. Okay, if you want to get rid of everything in a cell, you have to go to the Home tab, and on the Clear button over here, you see you have an option to say Clear All. That will clear contents and formats. You can clear just the formats. You can clear comments, just clear the contents, which is the same as hitting the delete button. Clear comments and clear hyperlinks. Okay, so that's basically skill number 3. Skill number 4, I'm going to click on the April worksheet. Basically, it says A13. They simply want to move this down a couple of rows. So one of the ways you can do that, of course, is I can do a cut. So I can click on here, cut, go to where I want it to go, and click paste. Okay, so cut and paste simply moves the values. I could do a copy and a paste and then go back and delete the original value, but that's actually adding an extra step. But also, if I click and highlight the range and I move my cursor to the border of the cell, then I'm going to show 4 arrows. That's the move cursor. When I click and release, that's the same as doing a cut and a paste. Okay, so we showed you how to use the fill handle as a copy and a paste. The move cursor, which is around the outside of the cell, is a cut and a paste. Okay, so that's basically that. All right, skill number 5, we're going to start talking about grouping worksheets together. One of the things I want you to look at here, so if you click on the April worksheet, you can see here that in column B I've got parking meter revenue, C I have parking meter parking ticket revenue, D I have maintenance costs, and then E I have personnel costs, and then later on we're going to calculate our total net income. If I click on the May worksheet, even though, let me put it back to normal view, even though I don't have headings showing here, and we're going to add those in a minute, the values are in the same spot. So parking revenue for the shopping district is in B5 here, and parking revenue for the shopping district for April is in B5 here. If I click on May, or on June, I'm going to look here, and in cell B5 I have parking revenue for the shopping district, and so on. It's important, if you're going to use grouping worksheets, that the data that you have has to be in exactly the same place. So what we're going to do is, earlier we've talked about the fact that whatever you have highlighted in Excel, whatever action you take affects everything that's been highlighted. Okay, so if I want to bold a section of cells, I can highlight that section of cells and then hit the bold button or do a Control B to bold. Okay, so those cells are highlighted from A5 to E7, and if I bold, all of those cells are bolded. The same effect comes into play with worksheets. So right now my April worksheet is my active worksheet. But I can make April, May, and June my active worksheets, and that if I do that, then any changes that I make on one of the worksheets will automatically show up in the other 2 worksheets. Why that's dangerous is because if I have worksheets grouped together and don't realize that I have, and I start adding data into one of those worksheets, it will automatically put that data into the other worksheets that are grouped at the same time, and you get no warning. Anything that's on those other worksheets in those locations are going to be overwritten by whatever it is you're typing in. So I don't recommend grouping worksheets except for things like formatting. Okay, but the important thing here is that sometimes you go to click on a worksheet and inadvertently you select 2 worksheets. You've got to be aware that if you do that and then you start working, you're going to be overwriting information on the second worksheet or whatever the ones you have grouped. Okay, so let's talk about how to group worksheets together. If I click on the April worksheet and I right click on that worksheet, I bring up a drop down menu and here I can see an option that says select all sheets. Now that's going to select all 4 worksheets currently on this worksheet, the topics worksheet, the April, May, and June one. Well, I don't want to make changes to my topics worksheet. I only want to make changes to the April, May, and June worksheet. So I can't use right click and select all sheets. I have to do it a different way. One way to do it is I can click on the first worksheet, then hold my shift button down and click on the last worksheet. Now you can see that the April, May, and June worksheets are selected. And here's one of the reasons that I like to add color to my worksheet tabs, because now I can see that the color is blended out on all 3 worksheets, so that's a visual clue to me that those 3 worksheets are grouped together. The only other way that I know that they're grouped is that if I go up in the very top of the worksheet and I look at the heading, you can see that it says group beside the file name. Now I'm not sure if my demo is going to show you that, but if you look at the very top bar on your worksheet, it's going to say EXL03 parking dash group. Okay, if I want to get out of the grouping, I can right click and say ungroup the sheets, or I could have clicked on the topics worksheet, which isn't part of the group, which would automatically break the grouping. Now what would happen if I only wanted to select the April and the June worksheet? Then I can click on the April worksheet, hold my control key down, and click on the June worksheet, and now you can see that April and June are linked together, but May is not. Okay, so if I click on the May, it will break the grouping, so it no longer says group up on the top, on the name bar, and I've only got the April worksheet selected. Okay, so what I want you to do is select April to June. So I'm going to click on April, hold my shift key down, click on June. So now any changes that I make on one worksheet is going to automatically carry through to all the other worksheets. So we're going to do some things here. So we're going to change, I want you to select the headings, and I'm going to merge and center that. And I'm going to do the same for parking revenue. And I'm going to change the colors just to play a little bit. So I'm going to go to, so I'll select the top one, row A1, and I'm going to change that to, let's say, accent 1. And I'm going to click on A2, and I'm going to change that to, let's say, 40% accent 1. Okay, so this is the reason that the accent theme colors have different variations, because then it gives you the ability to say, this is a dark blue and this is the same color but slightly lighter in color. So it helps to keep your headings linked together, or looking visually the same. I'm going to select my headings. I'm going to bold those. I'm going to select my subheadings here. I'm going to change those to be the same color as this here. So I'm going to go to sheet to here. I'm going to select 20% accent 1. So now they're all looking very much the same. Okay, so I'm going to kind of step away a little bit from the examples that we have here. I'm going to put my totals in here. So this is actually skill number 6, bed mass. What I want in here is my net income. So my net income is going to be my parking meter revenue plus my ticket revenue minus my maintenance costs plus my personnel costs. So I can't put in a formula that says equals this plus this minus this plus this, because of bed mass, what it's going to do is it's going to take parking meter revenue plus parking ticket revenue, subtract the maintenance cost, and then add in the personnel costs. So that's not going to work. So I can go up here on my formula bar and add brackets so that bed mass will come into play. Now, in the textbook, they show you how to do it this way. So again, if I was to enter that formula in real life, I would say equals, type in my bracket, this parking meter revenue plus parking ticket revenue, whoops, end bracket, plus maintenance costs, whoops, forgot the bracket, maintenance costs plus personnel costs, end bracket, enter. Okay. Then I can take that, copy it down. All right. I can go in here, I can type in the word total. I can put in my totals, so I can do it using the quick analysis lens. No, I can't. Never mind. You can't do the quick analysis lens when worksheets are grouped together. So I'm going to have to use my auto sum, and then I can take my fill handle and drag that across to create all my totals. Now at the same time, while I'm here, I'm going to add all my proper formats. So remember I said earlier that in accounting format is what you need for the top row and the bottom row. So I'm going to select the top row, I'm going to hold my control key down, select my bottom row, and then I'm going to go to cell styles, currency 0. But notice now that my numbers don't line up, right? So accounting format gives me $, no decimal places because I selected currency 0. I could have also clicked up here on accounting number format and taken away the 2 decimal points. So within accounting format, it puts the $sign at the left margin. It leaves a space at the end so that if you have a negative number, you can have brackets. So on my middle numbers have to be cell style, comma 0. And then finally, my total line here has to have the total cell style. Okay. All right. So now, and just to be on what I want to do here is I'm going to select the downtown, and I'm going to use the format painter to copy the formats down to there. And we'll cover format painter later in the course. Okay. So if I click on my May worksheet, you can see that all the changes that I made have been on the May worksheet and on the June worksheet. And we're going to put the headings in a second. But if I look, because these 3 worksheets are grouped together, on the April worksheet, the May worksheet, and the June worksheet, all the changes have happened at the same time. I'm going to break the grouping. Okay. Now I'm going to put my headings in. So where I've got location and so on, because on the May worksheet I don't have my headings in row 4. So I'm going to click on the April worksheet, I'm going to select my headings, and then I'm going to copy. Now when I put in a copy, I get a dash border around the outside. I'm going to go to actually before I do that, I'm going to hit escape to get out of that. Notice on maintenance costs here, I've got the E drop down to the next row. I'm simply going to drag the column heading a little bit so that it shows properly, so it's maintenance costs. Okay, so now I'm going to select all those headings. I'm going to click on copy, and I'm going to go to the May worksheet, and I'm going to click on row 4, and I'm just going to show you the wrong way first, and then I'll show you the correct way. If I click on paste, it'll put the headings in, but notice that the column widths aren't the same. All right, so whenever you do a paste, you have the option to do paste options. If I click on the drop down underneath paste, you can see I have all these different ways to paste. So this is just a straight paste. This is just to paste the formulas. This is just paste the formulas and the numbers. This keeps the source formats, no borders, keeps the column widths, and transpose, which we'll come back to. Paste values and so on and so forth. All right, these are the ones that we're going to focus on right now. So in this particular case, I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you how to do the whole thing over again. So I started in April, I selected my headings, I did a copy, and I'm using the copy button off the home tab, but you could do a Control-C or you could right click and click copy. And I'm going to go to May, and I'm going to click on paste. And when I click on paste, I get this paste options dialog box that shows up, or button. I'm going to click on that. And in this case, I want to keep the source column widths. So I'm going to click down here where it says keep source column widths. So now not only does it copy the formats and the contents, but it'll also change the column widths on the results. I'm going to go to June, click here, and I'm going to do it this way instead. I'm going to click here, paste column widths. Okay. Either way, it doesn't matter. You get the same result. Okay, so we're going to use some of those other options later on, the paste options, paste values, and so on, as we work through. So that's basically skills number 5, 6, and 7. Okay, all right, so skill number 8 is all about hide, delete, and move worksheets. If I click here, Well, let me see. If I right click on one of the sheet tabs, I have an option here called hide and unhide. So what hide would do is whatever worksheet I have would hide that worksheet from view. So you might wonder, why the heck do I need to even worry about hiding a worksheet? Understand that when you're working with an Excel, any value you need to do for a calculation has to be in the spreadsheet. Okay, but there are some times when you're working with confidential information or information that's not pertinent to what you're working on, that you don't want people to see that value. So let's say you're calculating bonuses. So to calculate a bonus, you need to know somebody's performance review rating, and you need to know their salary. Now, you just want to have the resultant bonus to show up in the spreadsheet, but you don't want people reading the spreadsheet to know what somebody was rated for on performance review or what their current salary is. So what you would do is you would put those two cells on another worksheet, and then do your formula, and we'll come back to 3D reference in a minute. And once you've done that, then you would hide the worksheet. Now again, you'd say, well, couldn't somebody just right click on it and click on unhide? Yes, they could, but there are options up here in the review tab where you can protect a worksheet. So it's up here in the protect options. There's protect sheet, protect workbook. I could protect the workbook with a password so that somebody who was looking at the worksheet wouldn't be able to unhide a worksheet unless they knew the password. Okay, so primary reason you hide a worksheet, or in this case, if I right click on it and I click on hide, you can see that there's actually 3 more worksheets here that were there. So there's the first quarter worksheet. I'm going to unhide the 2010 worksheet, which is down here now, and I'm going to unhide the 2011 worksheet, which is now here. So you can see that these worksheets weren't required for this particular calculation, so they just got them out of the way so that they didn't take up space. Notice as well that even though those worksheets were there, changes that I made when I had to group the worksheets, your hidden worksheets are not part of a grouping. So in this case, I really don't want the 2010 worksheet, so I'm going to right click and click on the delete option, and that will delete the worksheet. You'll get a prompt that comes up, will permanently delete the sheet. Do you want to continue? Say yes, and I'm going to delete the 2011 worksheet because I don't want that one anymore either. I'll keep the first quarter one for now, but it doesn't really matter that much. Okay, so that's the primary reason that you do that. Now, if I want to move a worksheet, so here I've got the topics worksheet and I've got this first quarter. I want topics to be the first worksheet. I can click on that worksheet, and you can see when I click on it, I get a little, change my cursor to a arrow pointing to a sheet, and I get a little triangle. If I move my cursor to the left and release, then it will move that worksheet. Another way to do it is I can right click on a worksheet, I can click on move or copy, and I have an option here to say I want to move that selected sheet to a particular location. So if I could say move it to the end, it will move it to the end here. I'm going to go back to that option again, move or copy. Notice as well that you do have an option here to move it to another workbook, or I can click the arrow here and say create a new workbook and move that worksheet there. So where that's helpful is, let's say I have a worksheet in a workbook that I want to move into another, I want to use in another worksheet. I can right click on that worksheet, I can go to move or copy, I can put a tick box and create a copy if I want to leave it in my original place and have a copy in my new place, and then I can actually copy it to another workbook or a new workbook. If I want to copy it to another active workbook, I would have to open both workbooks, and then I could do a move and a copy to copy, or a move or a copy from my original workbook to my new workbook. Okay, so that's quite handy as you go along. I'm just simply going to move the topics worksheet back to the start. A second, I'm on the wrong worksheet here. So I'm going to click on the worksheet and drag it back to be the first worksheet. Okay. Summary worksheets. Now, so this is kind of the last thing we're going to be talking about in this worksheet. In this particular workbook, if I go back, I've got my April data, I've got my May data, I've got my June data. But what I really want is I want to have a summary worksheet that has all my totals together. So to do that, I'm going to create a new workbook. So I'm going to click here on New Sheet. It'll call that sheet Sheet 5. I'm going to double click, change the name to Summary. By tradition, the summary worksheet should be my first worksheet behind topics because that's a separate thing altogether. But so I've got my summary worksheet. I'm going to click on April. I'm going to select my headings. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back to my summary worksheet. I'm going to paste, keeping the column widths. So now I have all my headings. I'm going to change the word April to simply say Aspen Falls. And in location, I'm going to change that to month. So then I want April, May, June, and total. So what I want in here is I want my total from here. So I want my parking meter revenue from all three locations for the month of April. So 17,525. So I want that number to display here in my April parking meter revenue. So let's try a couple of ways that are wrong, and just to show you. So I could say here, I want to copy that. So I'm going to right click on copy. I'm going to go back to summary, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to click paste. And it's 0, right? I had 17,525 here, but if I click on summary, I show 0. And that's because, remember, when you're working with Excel, you're working with the underlying value, not the displayed value. If I take a look on my April worksheet in cell B8, it's showing me a formula, the sum of B5 to B7. So it's not 17,525, it's the sum of these three cells. But remember that the formula is B5 to B7, and when I do a copy and a paste, relative addressing is going to change that formula. So I'm in B8, but I'm actually copying it to B5. So B5 is 3 rows up. So where this said B5 to B7, when I go to the summary worksheet, it's actually B2 to B4 because relative addressing changed those references. But regardless, it's still wrong, right? So what I need to do is delete that, go back to April. Well, let's try a different way. I'm going to click here, I'm going to do a copy, Control C, I'm going to go to summary, and I'm going to paste the value. So instead of pasting the formula, it pastes the displayed value. Now the problem with this is, there's my 17,525, so that's correct. But if I go back to the April sheet and let's say somebody made a mistake and that's supposed to be $200, my formula here now is 15,325, but if I go to my summary sheet, it's still showing 17,525. So of course that's incorrect as well. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to change that back to 2,400. So let me show you the correct way. There's my proper value. So I'm going to start with my summary sheet. And remember, anytime you are creating a formula, you start with the equal sign. So I'm going to click on my equal sign. And then I'm simply going to go to April, and I'm going to point to my value. Okay, so take a look at your formula bar. At the formula bar, it says equals April exclamation mark B8. So this is called a 3D reference. So a 3D reference is simply a reference on a spreadsheet that's pointing to another cell on a different worksheet, or it could even be on a different workbook. So in this case, I'm done, right? I don't want it to go any further, so I'm going to hit enter. So now if I click back on that cell, it says April equals April exclamation mark B8. So let me put the May one in. So I'm going to again equals, go to May, point to the value, and here's the important thing that people screw up on too. So notice that I have a dashed border around that cell, and again, remember, that's simply when you're doing point and click. It's simple. You have to tell it that you're done before you quit. So if I go back to my summary worksheet, you can see now it changes to equal summary B8. So of course that's not right. So when you're doing a 3D reference, what you are going to do is equal, point to the reference, and then you're done. So hit enter or tab or whatever. And I'm going to do the same thing for June. So equals June, 3D reference, hit enter. Now, and don't worry about the formatting, we'll fix that in a minute, I can put my sum function in here to total those up. And now I can use 3D ref, or I can use the fill handle to copy those across, because this is April B8. So when I use the fill handle to copy it off, it's going to change it to April C8 and D and E and F. Okay. All right. So let me get rid of this. So I'm going to click on here. I'm going to get rid of the formats there. And I'm going to change these to what they should be, which is comma 0. These are correct, right? So those are accounting 0. So I'm going to change these to currency 0 format. And then I'm simply going to apply my total cell style here. And we're done. Okay, so that is 3D reference. So what 3D reference simply says is that you start with an equal sign, you point to the cell you want, and then you tell it you're done. So hit enter or tab. Usually enter's the one that most people will go with. Okay, so that's skill number 9. Skill number one thing I said earlier, I was going to show you how to add the, so I'm going to group the worksheet. So I'm going to group April, hold my shift button down and select June. Then I'm going to go to Insert, Headers and Footers, and in my header I'm going to put my sheet name. Click off of it so it displays, and then go back to normal view. And now if I look at these you can see that I have my heading showing on all the worksheets. So I simply did a group the worksheets and then inserted my headers and footers, which put the sheet tab name into the header on all of the worksheets. Skill number 10 is just to create a clustered bar chart, which is no different than we've done before last week, but there's a couple of new things we're going to cover off here. So I'm going to go to the summary sheet. I'm going to select A4 to E7. So remember on worksheets, a clustered chart is so that you can compare numbers against each other. So in this case, we're going to compare the May against the June, April versus May versus June for parking meter revenue and parking meter cost. Okay, so I'm going to go to Insert. I could use recommended charts. So there's my clustered bar. And I'm going to say, yep, that's what I want. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to take that, I'm going to drag it down here. Remember, when you're working with charts, make sure that you always put it in the middle of a cell so that it's, if I want to make it a little bigger, I can drag it that way. Okay. Then once you've got the chart selected, you get that new menu called Chart Tools with the Design and Format tab. And in the chart design, I can add chart elements. I can pick quick layouts, so I can say I want it to look like that. Yeah, I really don't want that, so I'm going to undo that. But again, so quick layout just adds different components. Styles, we change the way it looks. I'll pick a style that I like. I can click on the title. I can change the title. My legend is down here. I can click on chart elements here, or I can click on chart elements here. There's my legend. So I've got that green, hit the arrow at the end. I could say I want it to be, let's put it at the top. I could add any of these other elements, axis titles and so on and so forth. Styles, again, were just the same as the styles up here. Now the other thing here, if you look on the Design tab, to the right of the styles, you've got something called Switch Rows and Columns. So right now you can see that what I have is in my legend, I've got my June, May, and April. For some reason it's reversed it, but whatever. And so within personnel costs, I can see how the costs change depending on the month. And then same thing with maintenance costs, parking tickets, and parking meters. So this chart would be used to take a look at saying within a particular category, personnel costs, what's happened within those 3 months. Switch rows and columns would simply switch it around, so now I would have all right, in June, my personnel cost versus my maintenance cost versus my ticket revenue and my parking meter revenue. So now I'm looking at how I'm doing within the 4 different costs. So all switch rows and columns does exactly what it sounds like. It just switches them around. Okay. Okay, and I think that's enough for today. So we're going to close this off and